Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Good morning and welcome to Government Contracting Weekly. I'm Jim McCarthy, the owner of Key Solutions and the host of this show. We know that small business owners and employees make up a considerable part of our weekly audience. And for that reason, I'm very pleased that we'll be committing today's entire program to the current state of affairs in the Small Business Administration. Joining me today is John Shoraka, the Associate Administrator for Government Contracting and Business Development for the SBA. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so let's get right to it. John Shoraka, 1989 to 2010, Vice President, Ares Group Financial Consultants. 2006 to 2010, Chair, U.S. Small Business Association for International Contractors. 2010-2011, Regional Administrator, U.S. SBA. December 2011, named Associate Administrator of Government Contracting and Business Development, U.S. Small Business Administration. Education, Bachelor's at University of Maryland and an MBA from George Washington University School of Business. John, welcome to the show. In July of this year, SBA released its annual report card on how government did in meeting the small business goals. Yep. What does that report card say? How well did the government do?
So the government, for the first time in 8 years, achieved the 23% goal that's statutorily set by Congress. So for the first time in a very long time, we received a grade of A. This was,
and that's due to your efforts, I'm sure. Right?
Well, you know, it's certainly a team effort. It's working with our sister agencies. There's a lot of focus from the White House with respect to small business procurement. There's a lot of focus on implementing best practices and institutionalizing best practices that really have gotten us here.
And that's why you were able to meet the goals for the first time in 8 years.
I think so. I think so.
Okay.
Direct focus.
All right. So when you talk overall the government, how would you say, are there some leading lights? You know, are there some agencies that are out in front and some that are still lagging in this area, even though it averages 23%?
Right. Yeah. That's a great point that you make, Jim. It's you know, agencies like ours that procure small business friendly procurements and goods and services have a goal of like 70%. Agencies like the Department of Energy, who has a much more complex buying structure and model, has a much lower goal, 7%. Right. Overall, the federal government is required to meet the 23%. We had this year 17 A's, record number of A's. We had 3 A pluses, Department of Interior, Office of Personnel Management, as well as the Department of Transportation, all received A pluses.
And what does it take to get an A or an A plus? I mean, what is the grading criteria?
So 80% of the grade goes towards their prime contracting dollars, right? So we always talk about a 23-5-5-3-3. 23% overall small business, 5% for small disadvantaged business, 5% for women-owned small businesses, 3% for hub zone firms, and 3% for service-disabled veteran-owned small businesses.
Those latter statistics are a part of the 23%
That's correct.
Overall. Okay,
That's correct.
Got you on
That's
that.
correct.
Okay, so some agencies, you know, have done better than others. Others have a bigger challenge, but nevertheless, collectively, you all have done very good this year.
That's right.
Okay,
That's
so
right.
Let's talk about that ceiling. It's statutorily set at 23% now, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, would you say that constitutes the floor or the ceiling for the future? In other words, is the bar set right now, or should it be higher or lower?
I consider the 23%, it's obviously statutorily set by Congress, right? And I personally consider that the floor, because the statute, the Small Business Act, really talks about maximum practicable opportunity. But we've really never done an analysis of what is that maximum practicable opportunity, right? It could potentially be 30% or 25%. I think our position is we've had a methodology to try to achieve this goal. Now we're achieving this goal. So we've compared apples to apples to apples year after year. We should try to meet the goal for several years to make sure that we are consistent, and then maybe take a look at what really is the appropriate target.
Right. Okay, validate it over time and then see if it ought to be adjusted.
Right.
And of course, as you say, that's up to Congress anyway.
That's
so
right.
Do it right. And your office will help enforce whatever the rule is that the Congress says. But
that's right.
Right now it's 23%.
That's right.
Okay, so everybody knows that this past year was not a good year for government contractors in general and small businesses in particular. How did that impact on the ratings or the scores or the overall completion of towards the goal?
Yeah.
How did that impact?
So obviously we talk about the uncertainty with the budget process. We talk about sequestration, et cetera. And obviously, anytime there's uncertainty, as you just mentioned, it's difficult for government contractors to look at their pipelines, to plan out and project their contracts and their acquisitions or sales to the federal government. What we have seen, though, in the small business sector is even though the dollars were contracting, even though the overall pie has shrunk, well, we've still seen a greater portion of that pie going to small businesses.
So the rate of growth is higher.
Right,
for that.
and we always look at, look, over the first 5 years of this administration, we have gotten roughly $460 billion into the hands of small businesses. Compared to the previous 5 years, that's an additional $62 billion into the hands of small businesses.
Right.
And I think it's just the focus, high-level focus.
When you say high-level focus, what do you attribute that such a track record on? In other words, what are you all doing different now that a decade ago wasn't being done?
Sure.
Okay.
I think there was initially high-level focus with a White House task force just on small business procurement, which brought a lot of attention to the issue. The National Defense Authorization Act of 2013 had many provisions that helped small businesses really level the playing field. The Small Business Jobs Act of 2010 also had a lot of provisions that we've implemented over time. I think one of the things we talk about when we talk about the White House focus, the White House Small Business Procurement Group had a ask of all the agencies, as we put it. And the ask really was, if you're a senior executive service member and you have a program and a budget, you should be gold to a small business target, right? Traditionally, the onus was always on the acquisition side. But once we jumped the fence and put it on the program side, I think that's when you really see a lot of attention.
And that maybe that's a large reason why, at least a large contributing factor to why you've been successful then.
I think so.
You bridged that gap. You
Absolutely.
jumped that fence. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right. This may sound like a dumb question, and I don't mean it to be, but do you find by and large that federal agencies welcome the involvement of SBA, or do they feel like it's something being forced upon?
That's a great question. I think when an agency looks at it as a win-win, that's where we really see traction. Small businesses are not only the lifeblood of our communities, right? Something like 3 out of 4 people work at a small business. They have the most employment and generate the most employment and growth, et cetera. But small businesses also bring innovation, creativity, and also access to senior leadership at the firm, right? So when an agency like the Department of Defense engages with a small business, it's really a win-win. The federal government gets access to some of the most innovative products and services, but at the same time, that small business gets the revenue to grow their company and affect their local communities.
All right, well, thank you. We're going to step away for a commercial now. When we come back, there's more to this whole program than just small business. There's various socioeconomic subgroups within that, and we're going to explore that when we return from this commercial break.
So, did we win that government contract?
We did.
And?
And now we've got to deal with the regulatory hurdles.
Well, good luck with that.
When the government's your client, you need to play by their rules.
And the rules change more than you think.
Exactly. We need someone who's done this before. Plus, it's complicated, so we're going with BDO.
BDO?
People who know government contracting know BDO.
Working in contract management is a complex job. Creating, executing, managing contracts. It's an ever-changing world, and our members share the same challenges. At the National Contract Management Association, we know this business, gathering the best minds in our field, furthering your career by providing knowledge and training. Together, we've figured it out.
Let's talk about the socioeconomic program. How did the U.S. government do in the various categories of small business subcontracting?
It's a great question, Jim. Thanks. We have the various socioeconomic categories, and as I mentioned earlier, the 5-5-3-3, 5% for small disadvantaged businesses as an example, and to a significant degree, those are socially and economically disadvantaged businesses, 8A firms.
Right.
The goal is 5%. This year we achieved in excess of 8%, and it's the highest achievement in history.
In history.
In history. With respect to service-disabled, veteran-owned small business companies, the goal there is 3%. In 2012, it was the first year that the federal government ever achieved its goal. This year, we exceeded that 3%. I think it was 3.39% was the performance rate. So we've seen continuous improvement in both the SDB and the SDVOSB category. The other category is the women-owned small business category. As you may know, that the set-aside program for the women-owned small business program was established in 2009. And we've really been working in establishing the program, gaining traction in that program.
Establishing a platform, and it hasn't taken off yet, but it will.
It will, and I think there's been a lot of changes to sort of make sure that it gains traction. Last year on the National Defense Authorization Act, they removed the caps for setting aside. In other words, there were caps of $4 and $6 million for contracts. And you can imagine how many contract activities you would have to execute to get to the 5% goal. So with the cap removed, it really gives the opportunity for contracting officers to use that tool.
My experience, which I suggest by no means mean that I'm correct at all, but sometimes it's difficult for prime contractors to find hub zone.
Yeah.
Now, is SBA aware of that?
Absolutely. The Hub Zone program, as you know, is based on census data and economic data and unemployment data, and that's really what establishes what a hub zone is. Based on the 2010 census, there was a lot of redesignation, and we actually lost a lot of our contract-ready firms in the Hub Zone program. That has created a huge challenge for agencies to meet their Hub Zone goal. What we've done over the last several years is we've worked with agencies, we've worked with partners, stakeholders to recruit new contract-ready hub zone firms. But I'd encourage firms to really look at that program. If you're in a hub zone, if 35% of your employees reside in a hub zone, not specifically that same hub zone, in a hub zone, it's a great opportunity for federal procurement. Agencies are looking for firms that have that certification. And it's a great opportunity.
Okay, so the SBA is aware that it's a difficult thing for us in industry to do.
Yes.
But okay.
Yes.
So what accounts for the individual differences in performance among agencies in this category? Some do better than others, obviously. Why?
Yeah.
I mean, why? What is it? Why?
Yeah, I think, well, we talked about keeping senior leadership accountable, right? And SES, or Senior Executive Service Members, and how that was originally a White House ask and how that worked its way into the National Defense Authorization Act of 13 and now is law. I think as some of these things get implemented, another ask was the OSDBU, the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. Are they buried somewhere in the agency, or are they reporting to senior leadership? So that was another ask. As we see these changes occurring, and some agencies obviously move faster than others. As we see these changes occurring, as we see senior leadership really focused on small business procurement, and you made a good point earlier, not just to hit the goal, but what does the small business bring for my agency? What is it that is really a win-win?
The creativity and innovation that you mentioned.
As the focus increases on that, and as senior leadership is engaged, that's where we really see the needle.
Are there any meaningful penalties or sanctions or repercussions for an agency if it fails to meet its goals?
Yeah. Well, the scorecard is really our big stick,
That's
right?
The club.
We release a scorecard. It goes to Congress, and there can be hearings held with respect to how did you do on your scorecard.
How come you didn't
and that's
do that?
really the big stick.
What about when it comes to prime contractors and subs? If a prime in their contract has a clause that says they have to have so much small business utilization and they don't make it, is there a penalty attached to that?
That's an excellent point. I come from industry. I was a small business government contractor, and I know that, and you know, large businesses have a role in federal procurement, as do small businesses. But I know sometimes large businesses have teaming plans, subcontracting plans, and we hear this constantly, right? We win the project, and the small business subcontractors don't necessarily engage. Small Business Jobs Act required us to write a rule around keeping prime contractors accountable to their subcontracting plans.
And how do we do that?
So making sure that if there is a change to the subcontracting plan, the contracting officer has to be notified. So that was actually put into our rules last summer, and we're working with the Federal Acquisition Council to put it into the FAR, hopefully in the next several months.
Okay.
So really keeping the prime accountable to the subcontracting plan is key.
Can one expect ultimately some sort of penalties or liquidated damages or offsets against award fee earned if they're not doing well in these areas?
Some agencies have gone as far as that,
They
right?
have done that already.
Our rule doesn't encapsulate those types of penalties. Our rule really was a balancing act between the agency's needs and the general public's wants and desires, right? So it's sort of a balancing act. But I think when you have a prime contractor really having to report any changes, that highlights the potential for are we really doing the bait and switch? And once that comes to light, I think there's more visibility with respect to the usage of small business subcontractors.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a break now again, and when we come back, I'd like to get into what I think is called the ostensible subcontractor rule or affiliation and how that may impact our marketplace today.
Yeah.
So we will take a few moments and we'll be right back.
What do you want for your business? If you're a federal contractor, your likely answer is to win. But winning these days is harder to do as the market has become increasingly competitive and demands that you do much more with much less. Hi, I'm Lauren LaMarche, a certified professional coach and proposal manager. At KSI, we believe your key to winning lies in developing your proposal team. Integrating our leadership coaching services into your existing proposal process can help you create a winning team that will give you a competitive edge and increase your win probability. For 30 years, we've helped the top 10 federal contractors and hundreds of smaller firms win over $130 billion in federal business. So, do you really want to win? If your answer is yes, then invest in your people. You can't afford not to. Contact me at ksileadershipcoaching.com because you need to win.
I'm here with John Shoraka from the SBA. John, before we went on break, we wanted to talk about an issue that's been emerging in our marketplace for some time. I'm going to tell you a story. I won't mention any names. But I had a client come to me, a small business one time, said, Jim, I got great news. What is that? We have signed a deal with company XYZ, a big company, and they're going to do everything. They're going to write the proposal. They got the key people all lined up. We're going to do it in their facility. All I got to do is sign the contract. Ain't that great? Yeah. What's wrong with this picture?
Absolutely. I mean, I think you put the nail on the head. If it's a small business set aside, the small business is supposed to be doing 51% of the work and really owns and implements that particular project or contract, et cetera. Right. And we want to make sure we talk about fraud, waste, and abuse, right? The benefits flowing to the intended recipients. The intended recipient is that small business where the contract has been set aside for. So we have rules and regulations with respect to when it is a set aside. How much of the work the small business actually implements.
So it turns on the percentage. I mean, I was thinking, is it possible that a small business could actually perform 51% of the work, but still is totally subservient to the large business sub?
Yeah.
Speak. Is that a concern?
When you look at situations like that, then you get into questions of affiliation, and the whole size question can become so complicated. You're from this business, right? So, oftentimes when I'm out on the road, people ask me, what is small? Well, obviously we have the North American Industry Classification Codes, and we have small size standards for each of those codes. Some of them are revenue-based, some of them employee-based. But you can have issues of affiliation. If your management is completely controlled by another larger firm, you can be considered affiliated. And so when we look at the size of that particular entity, we will combine those two entities.
What are some other tests of affiliation that you all use?
I think that one of the things is shared resources, shared management. And it's not always small and large. It can be multiple small businesses having a history of working together, having a history of joint venturing consistently over a long period of time where certain affiliation issues may arise.
Okay. new subject. This may be an urban myth, it may be urban legend, I guess, whatever. But one here is about where a small business, $20 million, $10 million small business, is suddenly awarded a $100 million contract. Sure. Why? What's going on? I mean, how does the government reasonably expect a small business to manage a contract of that size? Yeah. What's really at work here?
So I think there's multiple things happening. Obviously, I'd have to look at the data and see how often that really does happen, right? But there's instances where we hear that in the press, or we hear that in news, et cetera.
And the response?
And the response is that, look, it could be a multiple award contract where there's task orders under that multiple award contract, right? The overall total price of that contract may be valued at $100 million. But what is the actual flowing of the contract that may come, actual task orders that might come out of that contract? The other is that there's always, the contracting officer and the contracting agency will conduct an analysis of the firm's capabilities to implement that contract, right?
Pre-award?
Absolutely. Well, in the evaluation of the proposal, there is the analysis that can this firm really deliver what we are requiring it to deliver. Now, I will say that there are opportunities for small businesses to team together, and we're trying to improve those opportunities for small businesses to team together.
Is that like contracting teaming arrangements?
Exactly.
CTAs?
Maybe CTAs. The other thing that we recently wrote a rule around is, we talk about the 51%, right? The small business that gets the set aside has to do 51%. But let's say there are some subcontractors that are similarly situated. In other words, if it was a WOSB set aside, let's say some of your subcontractors are also WOSBs. The new rule will allow the similarly situated companies to account for that 51%. So as we see contracts being consolidated, as we see requirements becoming more complex, this really allows the small businesses to team with similarly situated companies and go after more larger and complex contracts.
I'm not sure I have the right term, but the word double dip comes to me. And I guess if a company is both a woman-owned business and a veteran business, do they get double credit?
They do. The agency will get credit for both. One of the things that we often talk about at our training sessions is the more designations that you can have. If you can be a hub zone, 8A, WOSB, the agency looks at that attractively, right? Because they get multiple credits for that contract.
Okay, so let's look at the crystal ball for a second. What are some of the initiatives or thrusts that perhaps your office has in store for the next couple of years to keep that percentage going up, the report cards getting better?
Yeah, we talked about some of the statutory changes that came from the Hill, the Small Business Jobs Act of 2010. Yeah. We talked about the National Defense Authorization Act. One of the things is making sure that all those rules that came out of that get implemented. When we talk about the teaming and the similarly situated companies, that's really a rule that we're working with and getting through the interagency clearance process. That really is a great opportunity for more small businesses to be engaged in procurement. Another thing that we talk about is the mentor-protege program. As you probably know, there's a mentor-protege program for the 8A program, right? It benefits the protege significantly. We're required to roll that out to all other small businesses. So we're looking to see how we can roll out a mentor-protege program similar to the 8A program, but for all small businesses.
For all, okay.
Yeah.
Fine.
And that's really going to give a lot of...
We only have roughly 30 seconds left here, but so I'm going to just ask you a question. In your view, does small business get a fair shake of the procurement pie? Are they getting their fair share?
I think more and more so, yes. I think there's always issues we talked about earlier today. There's always issues when you're a subcontractor and really making sure you get your fair share that was negotiated on the front end. We talk about making sure that when an agency looks to the market, and they follow the rule of two, right? If there are two or more small businesses that can provide the service or the good, it shall get set aside. Not it may, it shall get set aside.
Regardless of the size?
Regardless of it, but the question is there two or more small businesses that can implement it, right? So that size is taken into consideration.
Okay, well, we're going to step away one final time. When we come back, I'd like to ask you just maybe your final thoughts. Okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
AFCEA has been bringing government and industry together since 1946. By joining AFCEA, you will reach the decision makers and become part of the discussion. You'll increase market visibility, gain market insight, receive discounts on AFCEA member services and events, and manage and engage corporate associates. AFCEA is the association of choice. Join today at www.afcea.org.
Question for you. Do you lack an overall effective win strategy? Hi, I'm Jim McCarthy, owner of Key Solutions. For over 30 years, KSI has helped clients win or retain over 130 billion in government contracts by providing the keys to winning. Now, if you're chasing a must-win contract, visit aockeysolutions.com and click on Contact Us. It's a tough market. Don't go it alone. Welcome back to Government Contracting Weekly. I'm here with John Shoraka, who is the Small Business Administration Associate Administrator for Government Contracting and Business Development, and we've had a really great discussion. But I want to give you an opportunity, if you wanted to leave just one message for our audience related to small business, what would you say?
I would say make sure you use the resources that are at your disposal, and oftentimes for free. SBA has district offices, 68 district offices around the country. We have resource partners, small business development centers, SCORE chapters, women's business centers, all who can provide resources with respect not only just to small business development but to federal procurement. I'd encourage the small businesses to also reach out to our website. We have
and what would that be? What is the website?
SBA.gov. And once you're at SBA.gov, you can research not only my program, the government contracting program, but our entrepreneurial program and our lending programs. But the one thing that I do want to point out is that we have what we call Government Classroom, GC Classroom. And on there we have basic 101 doing work with the federal government, but we have really intricate material, even sometimes geared towards contracting officers. But they're available to the general public. We have material on there. We talked earlier about affiliation and size rules, et cetera. There's going to be a module on there that explains that and so firms can be certain that they're not running afoul of the rules.
You know, I can sense passion on your part. I'm picking that up. I hope our audience is as well. But anyway, we're out of time. I want to thank you, John, for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You'll come again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. When you stop to consider that virtually every large contractor started as a small company, and that the thousands of small companies who currently serve our country's mission are seen as a major source of innovation and creativity, you can better grasp the critical role that the Small Business Administration plays each and every day. I want to thank John Shoraka, the Associate Administrator for Government Contracting and Business Development for the SBA, for joining me today. But most importantly, I want to thank you, our viewers, for once again making Government Contracting Weekly a regular part of your learning regimen. Now, on behalf of all my colleagues at Key Solutions, I'm Jim McCarthy, and I'll see you next week.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.